64, you are a first offender. Your offense is forcible rape. The sentence date was June 26th of 2000. 40 years of hard labor was your sentence. Your parole date is 8/1/2021. The good time date is listed as 2/6/2033, and your full term date is February the 1st of 2040. That sounds about right, sir?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Marabella.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Mr. Jamerson, my name is Tony Marabella. I'll be asking you some questions. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Jamerson, how old are you, sir?
58.
And you've been in prison for how long now on these charges?
Going on 22 years.
Tell me, if you would, Mr. Jamerson, what happened and how did this come about? I mean, I know the facts. You can tell me a little bit about how all of this happened.
Yes, sir. Let me say that I'm very grateful for this privilege this morning. A few weeks before I got married, I was battling the Office of Community Service for custody of a young son from a previous relationship. And days before they were going to give me custody, his school called and said he was cutting up at school, and my fiance picked him up from school and he got a whipping. And the whipping left marks on his leg, so I kept him from school the next day. But the day he went back to school, the school asked him what happened. They saw the marks on his leg. He told them what happened. The school called me, and OCS called me and asked me what happened. I told them I had whipped him, but my son had already told him my fiance had whipped him. And so OCS took custody of my son. They saw my actions as trying to protect my fiance more than I was trying to protect my son. So after we got married, our 4 years of marriage were consumed with the obligations of trying to get my son back. Mandated court appearances, unscheduled visits to the home, counseling, marital counseling, couples counseling. And it took a toll on my marriage because OCS informed me that they saw my marriage as a negative factor in them giving me back my son.
Tell me how it came about that you began having sex with your stepdaughter.
Yes, sir. By the stress of all of that and it taking a toll on me as a man trying to function and trying to uphold a marriage and home, I feel weak to the stress. I didn't have any coping skills. I didn't have any problem solving. I didn't have any good judgment. I didn't have accountability. I wasn't living a lifestyle of recovery, and I lost my ability to function, and I just descended into a dark place, sir. And it resulted in me manipulating and grooming my 9-year-old stepdaughter into an abusive sexual situation that resulted in me impregnating her at age 11.
Now, since you've been in prison, you've taken a lot of courses. You took the sex offender treatment program?
Yes, sir. I have taken
all 4 phases.
All 4 phases and making changes for good. I am currently mentoring. I have completed.
We're going to get to all of those things in a second. But right now, I'd like to concentrate on your sex offender treatment and what you just told me about what was going on in your life. So tell me what you've learned while you've been in prison about what happened and how you committed these crimes and how you believe you'll be able to get over this and not do this again. So tell me what you learned from the sex offender treatment program that might be very helpful to you from preventing this from happening in the future.
Yes, sir. I learned the 27 risk factors that are at play at any time during a sex offense occurrence. And there are 27 of those risk factors. And I didn't know at the time of the commission of the offense, but I've learned that those things were indeed at work during the commission of my offense. And I'm very aware of them. And also, I'm aware that dealing with the people and places and things that cause those risks will help prevent me from relapse. I have developed a relapse prevention program of my own.
What does that look like? Tell me a little bit about that. Describe it to me if you would.
Yes, sir. Thought stopping is a method, whereas when negative thoughts come on you, you simply verbalize the word stop at a reasonable volume, and it stops it. Visual imaging is one. Also relaxation techniques, also prayer, and also helping others, getting outside of myself.
What have you learned? What effect do you believe your actions have had on this young woman?
Totally detrimental, sir. Totally life altering. Tragic. Lingering trauma. Yes, sir. Those things, at least those things.
Tell me a little bit about drinking and drugs. Were you doing alcohol? Were you drinking and doing drugs back during this time when all of this was going on?
No, sir, I was not during this time, but previous years before, I had been abusing alcohol and drugs, and I had been in the recovery community, but I had stepped away from being in the recovery community, so I wasn't living a lifestyle based on any spiritual principles or recovery at this time.
Tell me a little bit about your knowledge of the recovery community. So you had an alcohol and drug problem. What kind of drugs were you using back then?
I was using marijuana, crack, and alcohol. I had a sobriety date of August 1st, 1991.
Okay. And when did you relapse?
I didn't relapse into drugs or alcohol, but there was a void and vacuum created by me not living according to spiritual principles.
I got you. I got you. Now, what would be your sobriety plan today? I mean, do you consider yourself to be, even though you haven't used drugs in many, many years, do you still consider yourself to be a drug addict or an alcoholic?
I do.
Okay.
I
So
consider
what would
myself to be.
plan, what would be, you've discussed with me your sex offender treatment plan. What would be your sobriety plan for moving forward?
I plan on being an active member in AA, NA, and also celebrate recovery.
Now, you've completed Thinking for a Change, Living in Balance, Cage Your Rage. You've done victim awareness, pre-release. What are some of the highlights that you got from some of those programs? Can you just tell me one or two very good tidbits that you learned that you believe you'll carry out in the rest of your life?
Yes, sir. I've learned the causes and the reasons for why I live my life so recklessly and so irresponsibly. And I've learned coping skills. I've learned interventions, better problem solving, effective communication, even social skills such as asking for help that have allowed me to learn how to deal with the stressors and the obligations and the demands that I have faced over this entire incarceration.
It's my understanding that you're also a tutor for literacy programs. Is that correct?
I served 8 years as a certified tutor. Right now, I'm employed as an offender chaplain.
Okay. Now, you've been in prison for 22 years, and it's my understanding you've had 5 write-ups. Is that right? Your last one coming in 2017?
Yes, sir. Not 27. Yes, sir. That's in 2017.
2017 was your last one?
Yes, sir.
Now, I understand your transition plan is going to be that you're going to go with Veterans Outreach. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, it is.
Tell me about that program. Tell me what you understand you'll be doing with them. You'll be living with them?
I'll be living with them, and I also will be working there. They have jobs there as well, ranging from clerical to janitorial. And there's opportunity for upward mobility as well.
Now, how long do you expect to be living there? Is that a place where you'll be living for a long time? I mean, it sounds like you'll be working there for a long time. But what about living arrangements? Is it a permanent program to live there, or what? Where will you be living after, say, 6 months or a year?
Yes, sir. I'm looking to live there at least 6 months or a year.
Okay.
At that time, I should be more solid in my reintegration to society, and I'll be looking to live closer to my children and my grandchildren while still remaining a productive and active member of society, an active member of my church, active member of the recovery society as well.
Are you on any medication now? Do you take any sort of medication?
I take hypertension medication.
Okay. Have you ever had a mental health evaluation while you've been in prison?
Possibly.
Were you ever given any medication? Did they ever suggest you take any kind of medication?
No, sir.
Okay. Warden, what can you tell us about Mr. Jamerson?
Gary, obviously works in the chapel. I see him in there pretty often. As far as here at Rayburn, he has had no write-up since he's been here and been a pretty model offender while here. He and I had a good talk earlier in the week on going through his record and all of that. And it appears that he has done all the stuff in here to try to make himself better and re-enter into society. So I have no issues with him while in here.
Thank you, Warden. I appreciate it. Madam Chairman, that's all.
Mr. Jameson, I have one question. Have you had an opportunity to look into sex offender supervision? What kind of conditions gonna come with that? Have you did any looking into that? Or what do you understand?
Yes, ma'am. I've read the Louisiana revised statute concerning, and they require registration, depending on what tier an offender is classified under, and it determines how long they'll have to register.
Yeah, and you understand, did you see anything about contact? You said you want to go and be around your children and grandchildren. There's going to be some limitations to your contact with them because your victim was a minor victim.
Yes, ma'am. I understand
that. Yes, sir.
Yes,
okay, but that's going to be very, very important, and you're free. And if you're successful today, you'll be able to stay free.
Yes, ma'am.
That's all the questions. Good. That's all the questions I have. Yeah, do we have any? Mr. Lance Hadley,
Yes, ma'am.
we want to hear from you at this time. What do you want to tell us?
Yes, ma'am. Once again, first, good morning to the board and to all the listeners. My name is Lance Halley. I was formerly incarcerated in the state DOC facilities where over 11 years ago, I had the opportunity to meet Mr. Jameson. One thing that stood out to me, two things rather, was the ministry that Mr. Jameson presented and lived, and also his mentorship. Two things why I'm able to be successful even now being released from prison. and not being a part of that recidivism. I have watched him live the lifestyle, not just speak with lip service. I've had the opportunity to see his inspiration, music-wise, through the love, the care, the compassion that he has from the youth that flood the prison system today. I have seen him speak with junior high school kids, corralling the youth of the prison today. You know what I'm saying? But most importantly, the impact that he had on my life, especially from a spiritual standpoint. And for me, I think if it's anything that I would want to resonate with the board, is that in spirituality, it cultivates and it changes. And that is what, that is the desire that he birthed in me, through the many talks that we've had, through his lifestyle, me seeing him, you know what I'm saying, him living that behind closed doors, not just in front of a forum of people, you know what I'm saying? And I am thankful to have had the opportunity to meet him and still have a relationship with him today, because he is a large part of my success. And I thank y'all for this opportunity to speak.
We thank you, Mr. Halley, for taking of your time to share that with us. That's
Yes,
very impactful. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
And we want to acknowledge on the record that Joshua Jameson is here as well, although he's not speaking. Just want to acknowledge that on the record. Well, at this time, Mr. Jameson, what do you want to tell us before we render a decision?
I want to say that I'm truly sorry for what I did to Brittany. Every shameful and degrading act that I subjected her to, the trauma caused in her life, the humiliation, embarrassment, and the ridicule she had to endure as a result of me and being a baby, carrying a baby, for robbing her of her innocence in her childhood and altering her life so drastically. Truly sorry about that. And not only to Brittany, but to my other victims, family members, the victims in the largest sense. I'm truly sorry. If given an opportunity, I would, within whatever restrictions placed upon me, I would be willing to make any effort towards amends, any effort towards restitution or repair.
Panel ready to vote?
Yes.
Mr. Marabella?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Mr. Jamerson, you know, these kinds of cases are very difficult because the facts are very horrible. And, you know, that was a long time ago. And you described a lot of issues and a lot of problems that you had back then. It appears to me that you've really addressed a lot of those issues. I look at you today, you certainly appear to be very, very remorseful. You've taken some excellent programs while you've been in prison. You described in great detail what you learned in the sex offender treatment program and other things that you've had. You've got a good sobriety plan. You admit that you are an alcoholic and a drug addict, and at one point you had it under control. You realize what it takes to be able to do that. You do have law enforcement opposition, but you don't have opposition from the victim nor the victim's mother. They both say that they believe in forgiveness, and they have forgiven you. And the young victim has indicated that she is a survivor. She doesn't consider herself to be a victim. So she appears to be a very strong, very compassionate young woman. Your disciplinary record is very good. You have an excellent history record, prison record. Your risk assessment is low. You do have a needs assessment of high or substance abuse, and you've got a plan for that, and I'm content with that plan. You have a good transition plan, and you've served 22 years of your sentence. It's my vote today would be to grant your parole with the following conditions. Number one, that you go to the Veterans Outreach Program. And once you leave that program and complete that program, that you must follow, of course, my conditions really don't mean anything because the law requires that you follow all of the sex offender registration and notification laws. I'd also want to see you on a curfew from 9 p.m. to 6 a.m., 3 AA meetings per week. And I'd like you to do 5 hours of community service work per month. I think that you have done very well. The warden has given you some excellent comments, so that would be my vote. So good luck with this.
Thank you,
Ms.
sir.
Smith. Mr. Nelson?
Mr. Jamerson, my vote is the same. You've done some hard work, addressed some issues. And what's looking at the record, and talking to you today is what, looking at the record, I didn't think I was going to vote for you today. But after listening to you carefully, and your responses to Mr. Mirabella, I'm fully supportive in the fact that your victim is unopposed. My vote today is to grant the same special conditions Mr. Mirabella outlined.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Ms. Manassa. Mr. Jameson, I too was reluctant, but the more I read about your transformation, the things that you've done, and the young man that came today to attest to the impact that you have. And I hope with the 5 hours of community service, you'll continue to do that in young men's lives, in whatever capacity. So I concur with my colleagues. My vote is to grant for the reasons already stated on the record. I concur with the conditions stated, with the added condition that we have random drug screens by probation and parole. Best wishes to you, sir. Your parole has been granted.
Thank you, ma'am.
Anyone else like not surprised, but at the same time surprised? I'm just curious as to what interview they saw versus what interview I saw. He saw. He literally starts off by saying this long-winded story about how a few weeks before he got married, they were battling for custody. And his fiance gave his son a whipping. And when the school called, he was so chivalrous that he took responsibility for the whipping. And it was then his chivalry, his manliness, his desire to protect his fiance that ultimately got him in trouble. The school took their son away. And then when they got married, all of that, and then Mr. Mirabella cuts him off. Can you just tell us why you were having a sexual relationship with your 9-year-old stepdaughter? And he's like, oh, yes, because all of that was stressful on me. I was stressed. That's a good interview. Really? What? Then you find out that he impregnated her by the time she turned 11. That stress resulted in him manipulating and grooming. Mr. Mirabella calls her a young woman. I don't know. Is this like a New Orleans thing, or is this just a bad habit that the board members tend to fall in? You want to say that, well, his victim's not opposed, and I'm surprised he even got the 40-year sentence, I believe, his full-time date. That doesn't happen often in Louisiana. And you might say, well, she was pregnant. They had all the cards stacked against him. Plea deal was easy. Didn't need to worry about going to trial. And I would say, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So he took a 40-year plea deal. But we have seen cases where they're impregnated and they get less time, okay? So you can't You can't use logic when it comes to these sentencing deals, these plea deals. Even in this case, he could have gotten life. I mean, it's all in the bag. Doing what you did to her is the maximum. You know, you can give life, but they still did a 40-year deal, and he's getting out after just 23 years, or a little less. This hearing took place in 2022. So, you know, I don't. It's interesting because we saw a hearing just earlier today, a different. Maybe you've seen it by now, and it was a man who was guilty of similar offenses, but he came out and had an interview that was interesting, where he had seemingly so much insight. He wasn't making excuses. He said that he was born with a perverted mind, or he said, like, to quote his words, can you even call it a disease? He would scream out and say, why me? Why am I inflicted with this, where I would be attracted to children? This is what he was saying. And he said everything that I think you'd want to hear, to the point that I even believe what he was saying. But they denied him, and they denied him because they just didn't feel that they could release him, because he's still a risk to society, to children, because he didn't try to claim he was cured. He didn't try to claim that he knew. He just came out and left it all on the table. Why I still didn't fall for what he was saying is that I still believe that he purposely went and married a woman with 3 young children to get to his desires. And in this case, I think the same thing. This was a stepdaughter. This was, you know, he did this for a purpose, for a reason. And then he doesn't even take accountability for it. He says that he was stressed, or the stress is what caused it. And it's like, if that stress will cause it, then what's going to happen when you get back out to life? It's going to be a whole lot more stressful. Life is going to be a whole lot harder when you got all this stuff on your sheet, when you got to deal with being a registered offender. How are you going to react under the stress? You know, you're a menace to society. You're a danger. And the idea that you can get released is beyond me. He impregnated an 11-year-old girl, and he blames stress for the reason behind it. That's not taking accountability. That's insanity. Make it make sense, guys. That's why it's important for the DA to show up, because whatever the family says, you can't, I don't want to be sensitive around the family, but you need a DA to show up and say, no, this is what happened. This is not okay. He is a menace to society. He is a risk to our children. You cannot take a gamble and risk our children because of some programs, because a fellow inmate got up and spoke on his behalf. Are you kidding me? That's just my opinion. With that, I'll let you go.